He stood before the cameras and said it was totally obliterated. He said it was the most successful military operation in the history of warfare. He said Iran was crushed, decimated, annihilated. He said the nuclear program was gone forever. He said regime change was inevitable. He said it would be over soon. And tonight, one by one, every single one of those claims is being demolished. Not by Democrats, not by Iran's propaganda machine, not by foreign governments, by the United States intelligence community itself, by the CIA, by the Defense Intelligence Agency, by the National Intelligence Council, the most senior analytical body in the entire American spy apparatus, the people whose only job is to tell the President of the United States the truth, whether he wants to hear it or not. They told him the truth. He launched the war anyway. And now that truth is leaking out of Washington like blood through a bandage. And it is changing everything. Welcome. Subscribe right now because what we are covering today is the most explosive internal rupture of the Trump presidency. A war launched in direct contradiction to classified intelligence, now being exposed document by document, leak by leak, lie by lie. Let's go. Here is where this story begins. Not on February 28th when the bombs fell. Earlier, weeks earlier. Inside a windowless room in Washington, where the National Intelligence Council, the body that synthesizes the collective judgment of all 18 American intelligence agencies, finished writing a classified report, a top-secret assessment that went to the highest levels of the U.S. government. And the conclusion of that report was brutally simple. Even a large-scale military assault on Iran would be unlikely to topple the Islamic Republic, even if the supreme leader was killed, even if the entire military command was eliminated, even if the bombing lasted for months. The regime, its clerical establishment, its revolutionary guard, its deep institutional roots inside Iranian society would survive, adapt, reconstitute, and fight back. That report existed. It was classified top secret. It was circulated at the highest levels of the U.S. government. And then, according to 3 separate sources who confirmed its contents, the White House launched the war anyway. And the most devastating question in Washington right now is not whether the report was accurate. The question is whether Donald Trump was ever briefed on it. Because the White House's answer to that question is silence. When asked directly by the Washington Post whether Trump was briefed on the National Intelligence Council's assessment before launching Operation Epic Fury, the White House did not say yes, it did not say no, it said nothing. A spokesperson issued a statement about objectives and obliteration and never answered the question. The President of the United States may have launched the biggest American military operation since the Iraq War without reading or without heeding the most important classified intelligence assessment his own government produced on the subject. But wait, because the nuclear claim is where this story becomes truly explosive, truly historic. The kind of thing that in another era would have triggered congressional investigations before the week was out. Trump said he bombed Iran's nuclear facilities last June and obliterated the nuclear program forever. He repeated it on February 28th when this war began. He said it was the reason for the war, the nuclear threats, the imminent danger, the near miss that required American military action to prevent catastrophe. And then American intelligence produced its own assessment of what those June 2025 strikes actually achieved. And the conclusion was this. The strikes set Iran's nuclear program back by a few months, not years, not forever. A few months. A few months. And Trump called it total obliteration. He called it the complete and permanent destruction of Iran's nuclear capability. He told the American people that the threat was gone. And then he launched a second war against the same country, partly citing the same nuclear threat he had already declared eliminated. His own intelligence community's assessment directly contradicted the justification for the conflict, sitting in his hands before the first bomb fell. When the White House learned that CNN and the New York Times were about to publish the intelligence assessment, the press secretary did not say the report was inaccurate. She did not schedule a classified briefing for reporters. She called the person who leaked it an anonymous low-level loser. She said the report was flat out wrong. And then Trump posted in all capital letters on Truth Social, calling it fake news and an attempt to demean one of the most successful military strikes in history. That was the rebuttal, not facts, not a counter-assessment, insults and capital letters. And then his own deputy commander of CENTCOM, not a Democrat, not a journalist, not a leak, sat before the Senate Armed Services Committee and said under oath that Iran retains considerable military capabilities, not obliterated, considerable. A retired Army brigadier general went on CNN and said calling the nuclear strikes total obliteration is totally laughable. These are not political opponents. These are military and intelligence professionals with decades of service who are watching a president publicly say things that their classified reports directly contradict. But there is a third lie, one that is personal, one that involves 175 dead children in a girls' elementary school in southern Iran, and this one may be the most damaging of all. When Trump was asked whether American missiles struck the Shajareh Tayyebe Girls' School in Minab on the very first day of this war, killing between 168 and 175 children, most of them between 7 and 12 years old, he stood before the cameras and pointed the finger at Iran. In my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran because they are very inaccurate with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran. That statement went out to the world, and then the investigations began. Bellingcat, the gold standard of open source military investigation, the New York Times visual investigations team, PolitiFact's fact checkers, multiple forensic analysts. They examined the footage, they examined the fragments, they examined the trajectory data and the blast pattern and the physical evidence recovered from the site. And every single independent analysis reached the same conclusion. The evidence points to a Tomahawk cruise missile, an American Tomahawk. The only country in this war that uses Tomahawks is the United States. When confronted with that evidence, Trump changed his story. He claimed numerous other nations have Tomahawks. That statement was rated false. No other nation involved in this war uses Tomahawks. When asked for evidence that Iran was responsible, the administration provided none. When a military investigation was announced, the White House said it would accept the results, and the investigation remains open, while the families of 175 dead children in a country with no internet connection wait for an answer that may never come in a form they can access. Now here is what makes all of this truly dangerous, not just politically, constitutionally, historically. America has been here before. In 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, in which the Johnson administration claimed American ships were attacked by North Vietnam, was used to justify massive military escalation in Vietnam. Years later, it emerged that the second attack never happened. The intelligence was manipulated, and Vietnam consumed 58,000 American lives and tore the country apart. In 2003, Colin Powell stood before the United Nations and presented intelligence about Iraqi weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. The war that followed killed 4,500 Americans, displaced millions of Iraqis, and destabilized an entire region for 2 decades. The pattern is always the same: a president, a threat, classified intelligence that says the threat is more complicated than advertised, a war launched anyway, and then the intelligence leaking out afterward, document by document, source by source, while the bombs are still falling. Here is where this war stands right now against that history. The National Intelligence Council said regime change was unlikely. The regime installed a new supreme leader within days. The DIA said Iran would not have missiles capable of reaching the U.S. for 9 more years. Trump said the country was nearly under threat. Intelligence confirms there was no imminent threat. The nuclear strikes were assessed as setting the program back months. Trump called it permanent obliteration. A school was struck by what all independent evidence points to as an American tomahawk. Trump blamed Iran. A brigadier general called the official narrative totally laughable under his breath on national television. The deputy CENTCOM commander told Congress Iran retains considerable capabilities. And the White House's response to all of it is to call the leakers low-level losers. That is not a defense of the facts. That is what it looks like when the facts cannot be defended. Senator Tim Kaine, who sat on the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committees for 13 years, put it plainly on Fox News, not CNN, not MSNBC, Fox News. All of the intelligence I have seen tells me there was no imminent threat from Iran that justifies sending our sons and daughters into war. No imminent threat. From a Democratic senator on Fox News, in the middle of a war where 7 Americans are already dead and 140 have been wounded. The intelligence community told the truth before this war began. Trump launched it anyway. 7 Americans came home in coffins, 140 were wounded, 175 children died in a school. Oil hit $114, and now the classified reports are surfacing one by one, contradiction by contradiction, creating the most damaging paper trail a wartime president has faced since the Gulf of Tonkin. This is not about being for or against the war anymore. This is about whether the most powerful governments on earth was honest with the American people about why their sons and daughters were sent into combat. The intelligence community is saying in classified documents and in sworn Senate testimony that the answer to that question is no. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Congress should launch a full investigation into the intelligence behind this war? Subscribe right now for every major development as this story breaks wide open. Share this video immediately. We will see you in the next one.